Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my favorite books of 2020. I really tried to fit the model that most people do, where they do like the top 10, and I just couldn't. And so I'm saying, forget it. I'm not worried about that. I've grouped my books that I can't stop thinking about and that I want to say something about into kind of sections and genres so that I can talk about them and share them with you. Let's go next into Backlisted and Classics. So I really went deep in this year into the backlists, into older books that I hadn't had a chance to read before. And here are some of the ones that stood out to me. High Wages by Dorothy Whipple. If you like masterpiece theater, if you like any of those like shop girl in a town kind of stories, this is the one for you. I was charmed by this young woman who gets the gumption up when she visits a bigger town to actually go in and answer a help wanted sign and get the job, and how she grows personally. I always love a good career gal story, and this one was it par excellence. Fantastic. Then another Persephone. This is The Shuttle by Frances Hodgson Burnett. She wrote one of my favorite childhood books, The Secret Garden. Well, this is not The Secret Garden. This takes the story of the heiresses of America, kind of a Boston and New York, who were courted by the titled gentry of England because they needed money to save their lands and to save their ancestral homes. And this is the story of one of those marriages that goes so wrong, and the sister that tries to fix and tries to save her sister, who has been married off to a very bad man. I loved it, absolutely loved it. Then next up, I read a classic that I cannot speak more highly of. This is Nella Larsen's Passing. This is very tightly constructed story of two women who meet up as adults that were childhood friends. One has decided to pass as white and has married and her husband does not know that she is a Black woman. And the implications of that. The writing in this is exquisite, but the ending of this book is so complex and so interesting, and a masterclass in how you end a book, in my opinion. Next up, my favorite of the Nita Brookners that I've read so far. This is a project I'm doing with Leo of A Little Book Life, where we're reading all of Anita Brookner's oeuvre. This is Providence. This is the second book. Now, with this one, we have Kitty, and Kitty is a young academic, and she's trying to break in, and she, again, I love a career gal story. She's kind of struggling with finding her way and finding friendship, finding a career, and she is in love with a cad. Beautiful story, typical Anita Brookner. You've got your loneliness, your awkwardness, young person finding their way in the world. Fantastic book. Then I got a chance to break open my Folio Society edition of Excellent Women by Barbara Pym. I'd read some Barbara Pym before. I read some Tame Gazelle, but Excellent Women is my favorite. This is the story of a older woman. She is unmarried, and she's kind of known as the woman that helps out with the church. And a couple moves in underneath her, and she kind of gets sucked into their drama a little bit. And it's wonderful, delightful, just fantastic. Barbara Pym is a great writer. Then Frost in May. This is a Virago Modern classic. This is by Antonia White. This is a story of a young girl who goes to a convent school, and in the cloistered environment and the strange ways that these girls interact and are taught to interact was remarkable. Loved this book. Think about it all the time. Then The Tortoise and the Hare. This was by Elizabeth Jenkins. This is a story that kind of takes a common trope and switches it. So we have a young, sexy wife whose husband starts looking after and following and maybe falling in love with a frumpy older woman in the neighborhood. What does she do? Fantastic book. Another one that I can't stop talking about, The Street by Anne Petrie. This is a story of a woman, it feels so current, so real, who moves with her young son, leaves her husband, moves with the young son into this apartment, and is trying to do everything right and is foiled in so many ways. It is a very tense, very, very good, important story. I loved it. And then something very different. This is The Red Tenda of Bologna. Very slim little. This is one of the Penguin modern classics. This is number 30 by John Berger. This is a story of grief, but it's grief told from a man about his uncle that he loved. His uncle passes away and he goes to Bologna to kind of pay homage to all the things that his uncle taught him. And it's just stunningly beautiful. Now let's talk about classics. I also got a chance to read this Folio Society edition of Bleak House by Charles Dickens, also with my friend Leo of A Little Book Life. We did this for Victober. I'm going to put this down because it's so heavy. Actually, I'm going to hold it like this. So Bleak House is the story, very intricate, very dynamic, one of his last stories that he wrote. And so he's really at the top of his game. And it's about, fundamentally at the core, is how the civil judicial system was a trap in this Victorian London. Fantastic, just everything that you could want from a Dickens novel. The characters, the settings, the atmosphere, phenomenal. Then I read with my friend Juan of Just One Reader, we read Brideshead Revisited, and I got to read this gorgeous Folio Society edition. Brideshead Revisited, this was my second reading of it, is a story of a young man who is middle-class means, who becomes enchanted and falls in love with this family, this incredibly rich and entitled family, and falls in love, including, in essence, with all of them, and the home, Brideshead. So this was a joy to read. Then A Room with a View. I read this as part of Reading Rush because one of the prompts was to read a book that you've seen the movie of. And I don't rarely do this. I usually read the book before the movie. But one of my favorite movies is A Room with a View with Helena Bonham Carter and Daniel Day-Lewis. So I actually decided to read the book by E.M. Forster. And I was blown away. This is still one of the best rom-coms ever to exist. It's funny, it's charming, it's romantic, it's so romantic. So I absolutely adored it. And then for Victober, I read something so different, and this was Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Now, I hear what you're probably thinking, like that's a children's book. It was much more robust, much more exciting and funny and engaging than I ever expected. And I highly recommend it. Okay, so now we're up to historical fiction. For the first one, this was kind of panned by some people, and I don't get it. I loved it. I did the audio version of this. This is The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. So this is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but we focus on Mary, the bookish, studious, kind of by the book, nerdy one of the sisters. And I just loved spending time with her. I thought she was fantastic, and I just thought it was a delightful book. So it's a long book. Maybe it could have been edited a little bit more, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed spending the time there. Then I did finish the Cromwell series by Hilary Mantel. And I have to say my favorite is Bring Up the Bodies. This is really where the relationship between Thomas Cromwell gets tied to Anne Boleyn. And we see his rise, and then we see her fall. And we just know that something bad is going to happen after that. I think it had the most heart. It had the most intrigue and the most challenging aspects. I think this was, in my opinion, the best of the three. Shocker, an absolute surprise. Bernardine Evaristo appears twice in my list. This is The Emperor's Babe. This is so surprising. It's a novel in verse, incredibly wild and vibrant and experimental. What we're doing is we're looking at this 14-year-old Nubian girl who has been married off to a Roman soldier who is in Londinium. This is London when it was known as Londinium, AD 211. There's so much that happens in this book. It's almost like a modern telling with modern sensibilities of this young teenager who's kind of stuck in this world. So fun, wild. I will never forget the Colosseum scene in this book. It was intense, but fantastic. Confessions of Franny Langston. This is by Sarah Collins. This is a Victorian set novel, but it talks about a woman who was taken from slavery in Jamaica from the sugar plantations, which really is what funded so much of Victorian wealth. And set in London, she is kind of there as at the whims of her master. And it's a fantastic read. So many twists and turns, so many interesting characters. Thought it was phenomenal. It would be a great adjacent read to Victober. And especially if you want to read anything about Black British history, kind of a novelized version of that. Then this is something that kind of is on the adventure tip. This is Miss Benson's Beetle. This was by Rachel Joyce. Completely outside of my wheelhouse, but I love this book. So much so I got it from my mother and my sister, who both enjoyed it very much. This is a middle-aged woman who decides that it's time for her to live her dream, and her dream is to find a beetle that she thinks exists. Her father was very interested in the study of insects, and she grew up hearing about this golden beetle. And she has decided that she's going to go to this remote island and look for this. She's going to go on an adventure. And so she, on her own, decides to get an assistant and to undertake this on her own. There's some pathos underneath it. It is really funny. It's about friendship. It's about new beginnings. I loved it. It was really funny too, really funny. Now let's talk about mysteries, because I have a few. I want to highlight the Cat Holloway series. This is by Jennifer Ashley. This is kind of your below the stairs mystery. Our main character, Cat Holloway, is a cook. This is kind of around before the wars, and she is in London. She's a cook and gets pulled into all of these things that are happening around and kind of solves some murders. But in between, you really get an understanding of what a cook's life really looked like, the things that they do, and she talks a lot about the food that they make and all of the things that she has to attend to before she can run out and solve a mystery. Fun, fun, fun. Fun and smart. I also want to talk about Jade Dragon Mountain. This is the Lee Do series that I just started this year, and it's by Elsa Hart. This is set in China, and it's set in, I think it's the 1500s in China. Remarkable, atmospheric, slow-paced, a very smart, a very thoughtful story of a time in China where all these circumstances are coming together, and there's the encroachment of the East India Company. There's also some regional challenges that are happening in Tibet. And so it's just a fascinating period of time, and our main character is an exiled librarian. How can you go wrong? Then also Malice. This is by Keigo Higashino, and this one was translated by Alexander O. Smith and Ellie Alexander. This is kind of a very stripped back, not a lot of character development, not a lot of richness, but just psychological mystery, where there are two authors, and one says that he killed the other, and the police officer can't figure out how he did it and isn't sure, is he telling the truth or not. It's very sleek, it's very interesting, but not your typical mystery. Loved it. Another one, this was Malice, and this one were recommended by from Mel's Book and Adventures. She's fantastic when it comes to recommendations for these types of things. This is S.G. McLean's The Redemption of Alexander Seton. remarkable book. This is set in 1626 in Scotland, and it's just such a dark, interesting time where we have this gentleman who was kicked out of seminary school for doing something blasphemous, and he is back at home, and it's just one of those really dark, twisty stories where superstition and tradition kind of are meeting, and it is fantastic. And the atmosphere in this book is almost like another character. The time period, she just nailed it. This is a really, really great book. I'm going to read on with the series. And the last is the Verity Kent series. This is right in between the wars, and we have a woman who's incredibly smart, incredibly interesting, and her husband is MIA, assumed and presumed dead. And she gets pulled into some things that she needs to try to figure out. And in doing so, recognizes that she has a penchant for spying. Love the series, really smart, fun, and intelligent. And that's it. That's the end of my second video for all of my favorites for 2020. Thank you so much for watching. And again, we are still in a global pandemic. So I beg of you, please, if you're out with other people, please maintain a safe social distance. Wear your mask, wear two, now that's what they're saying, and wash your hands and don't touch your face. That's it for me. Thank you for watching, and I'll look forward to talking to you in my next video. Bye.